The auctioneer cast his eyes over the group of stolid farmers, most of whom he'd known for many years. He was on an improvised platform, and they were gathered round him in the open-sided Dutch barn at Ballinacquain. "Now we're gathered here," he said, "to dispose of this property of Ballinacquain with all farm buildings, equipment, crops and livestock that was farmed by Captain Lefroy Bower-Jones up to his recent sad passing." His voice droned on regarding the captain and his fine service in the South African War, but many of those present needed no reminding of the captain. He'd come to the island some 6 years ago, having cleverly bought his farm under the noses of several hopeful prospective local buyers. From his first day, he'd had 2 favourite sayings: "Time is money," and "efficiency means proficiency." And this had always jarred against the tread allure, time enough attitude of many of his neighbours. Despite this, most were ready to admit that this come-over had the ability to farm satisfactorily and apparently make a reasonable profit. He had looked at the big meadow and, to the consternation of the locals, had put it under the plough. Before the first furrow was ploughed, his neighbour had told him that this was a fairy field and was almost sacred ground. "Haven't you seen the fairy ring in it, Captain? The lil folk dance there when the moon is full. You can't plough up their playground." The captain had laughed. "We don't have fairies where I come from, and if there were these little folk that you talk of, I'm sure they'll be just as happy dancing in one of your fields." He carried on with his ploughing, and in the spring corn was sown. As the season developed, a fine crop of oats glistened in the sunshine, and the captain teased his neighbour about the little folk. "I'll have the binder in there later this week," he said. "I'll take more per acre than any farm round here." The moon was full the following night, and a steady breeze swept in from the sea. In the morning, the captain gave orders for the binder to be hitched and harvesting to start. He strolled down to the field. His glorious crop was no longer standing erect. Some lay this way, some that, and in the middle of the field was a huge ring of crumpled, mangled corn, as if thousands of feet had danced and frolicked all night through. The crop was sacrificed, but the captain still insisted that sometime in the future he would once again plough and cultivate the fairy field. He was a determined and stubborn man, but his stubbornness over the old road had more disastrous consequences. Weekly, following the pattern of his predecessors, he would hitch the horse to the old float and trail round the side of the mountain to meet fellow farmers at the market, always complaining about the ridiculous waste of time making this journey. "Why have I always been told to come right round the mountain?" he asked. "Isn't there an old road that runs over the top by the disused quarry? I'm sure it would be quicker." Old Johnny Quiggin nodded. "Fair enough, Captain," he said. "The old road is shorter. Well, it's just a lane, really, but it's a nasty one, that. You wouldn't be wanting to go that way." "Why ever not, if it's shorter? It would save time, and time is money." "But there's a Fynoderee on that road," said old Johnny. "By God, it's a brave man that would drive over there, especially if the mist is down or there's a touch of darkness." "No, Captain, you'd better stick to the good road round the mountain. What's another minute or two when you've got your whole life in front of you?" "What is this Fynoderee you talk of?" asked the captain. "Oh, 'tis a frightening creature that you must always avoid. There's no friendliness at it at all. Even the animals are scared and will run away. It's best not to go on that lane." "More silly superstition, is it?" snorted the captain. "You tried to frighten me off with your tales of fairies in the big meadow. I know the crop was ruined, but that wasn't fairies, I'm convinced. It was only a freak wind with eddies coming over the headland." Willie Quayle had been listening to the conversation and offered a little advice. "What Johnny says is right, sir, but you've just got to be careful. You're a stranger here, and you don't always know the way of things. Maybe it was just the wind that dropped your corn, but it's better to be safe than sorry, and I know a way round it. If you've still got the old horse that was bought with the farm, you might be all right. The old horse, Mary, knows that lane well and could sense the spirits. She would only climb the hill if it was safe. You might try her sometime and see what happens. The following week, the captain hitched old Mary to the float and slowly climbed the hill. The rate of progress was pathetically slow, but the captain persevered because he knew that it was still going to be quicker than the long road round. As the horse approached the old quarry, it stopped, and despite the captain tugging on the reins, it did a complete circle, ending up facing in the same direction as it had started, and then carried on at a faster pace over the cliff path to the market in the town. There was a reception committee of farmers awaiting his arrival, and the captain knew that they were all agog to know what had happened and how he had responded. He was almost ashamed to admit that the old horse had been in charge and had refused to answer to his handling of the reins. But eventually he mentioned it to the other farmers. They didn't seem at all surprised. "That's all right, old Mary knows best. She always has a look round, you see. If it's safe, she'll go, but if it's not, she'll be back home a lot faster than she came. If she sees it's safe, well, she knows the way, just you let her have her head. When old Tommy had her, he used to go to sleep and only woke up when she got him to market. The only spirits Johnny had were in a bottle under the seat. You can do the same. She'll look after you." Right through the months ahead, the captain used old Mary, and each week as she slowly approached the quarry, she turned right round and then increased her speed as she followed the cliff path. The captain fretted over the wasted time. The old horse moved so slowly, and it had this stupid habit of turning right round. If only he had a younger, faster horse that didn't have foolish habits, he was sure he could save a couple of hours every week. He talked to the farmers about his problem, but most of the old men stuck to the same advice, to rely on old Mary. Only one voice didn't agree. Ewan Quirk had never been very friendly towards the captain. Actually, he'd been hoping to buy Ballinacquain when it became vacant, and had waited just a little while too long. He'd been hoping for a lower price, although he knew it was well worth the asking price, when the captain nipped in and got possession. Ewan waited until the captain was alone before he made his approach. "You know, Captain, you're right in what you say. Old Mary's a good old thing, but she's had her day. It's time she was put down. I've got a young lively colt there that would just suit you. He needs a strong hand, but you're an ex-cavalryman. You could handle him easy enough." The captain was interested, and they talked horses. 2 days later, he saw the horse at Ewan's farm and was impressed. This was his sort of animal, a nice-looking creature and a fast mover. Coming over the hill would be no trouble in future. A deal was struck. The next 3 trips over the hill were fast journeys with no foolish roundabouts, and the captain was well pleased. The 4th trip was different. A light mist was settling on the hills, and the sky was heavy and oppressive. As they reached the vicinity of the quarry, the sky darkened. A mysterious wind whistled round the cart. The horse's ears suddenly lay flat along its head as a horrible scream echoed round the rock face of the quarry. The horse turned its head, and the captain saw the fear in its eyes. He also turned and looked behind him, and a monstrous being loomed over half the hillside. Strange pointed ears, large curved horns, a face of indescribable revulsion, with a gaping mouth and fang-like teeth and glaring blood-red eyes, surmounted a grotesque body with outstretched clawing hands. The captain shared the horse's fear and wielded his whip to escape from this fearsome creature. The young horse, with a wild neigh, plunged forward over the edge of the precipitous cliff face into the deep stony pit of the quarry. The auctioneer's voice droned on. Bidding was slow. The police said they didn't know why the float had crashed over the quarry face. The magistrate stressed that the captain was a very experienced horseman and was noted for his sober habits and never drank before the sun was at its height. Thoughts of the Fynoderee were in the minds of most of the old superstitious farmers. Would the ghost of the captain add to the horror of the area? Ewan looked around. No one was making a move. He gave the auctioneer a slight nod, and then first, second, third, the hammer fell. Ewan was the new owner of Ballinacquain, and he'd got it cheap.